Well, another episode of Sparks Family has just dropped, and who would have guessed it? We finally have another new character being introduced into the show, and she's been there in the background in the opening credits and things like that, but this is the first time she's ever popped up for real. And basically, she seems to be, well, Sparks Family's obligatory yardere character. Namely, for a fact, she has a deep-rooted crush on Loid, but doesn't really quite voice it. And at the same time, I think is also a bit jealous of the fact that Loid seems to have, basically, Yor in his life, along with Anya, while also probably comparing herself to how she could do the job better than Yor can. Bearing in mind the fact that Yor is a bad cook, and also they make another point of that gag again, especially given the fact of, once again, Yor doing bad cooking, which promptly puts Anya down for the count again, as she always does. That is quite possibly, I think, that is quite possibly one of the better ways of doing the old bad cook joke, because it's not overdone. It's not overdone in that point of context, and because it only happens once or twice, they melted for all it's worth in the first couple of episodes, with the fact that she completely ruins a fried egg, and that was pretty much one of the funnier gags there. Also, I think it's the fact of, once again, Yor thinks she's a failure because Loid once again had to step in to save the day. Just because of how funny it was. The other brilliant thing the interesting thing about Fiona, our character, is the fact that she is, of course, the yardere, but basically I think she was trained by Loid in everything that she does. As a result, her attitude and way of dealing things is basically based on what she said, basically, don't show any emotion, don't show any weakness, otherwise that will be exploited or could get you caught, or worse, they will excuse that in interrogation. The other interesting thing about, I think, Fiona's character is, but one, she thinks she can do the mission a whole lot easier, and quite possibly would have had to have stepped in. But I think also is the fact that, in the opening bit of the episode, is the fact that Handler, or whatever her name is, we don't exactly know that, seems to have pretty much the fact of, she knows for a fact what Fiona is. I mean, she's probably like one of the few assassins Wise has. I think that she probably does do assassin work. Given for a fact of how dark and melancholy her personality is, I mean, the fact she's femme fatale, ice cold, that sort of thing, pretty much devotes herself to the entire mission, puts her other least her male colleagues ill at ease, and the fact that her handler pretty much has a hard time dealing with her, given for the fact of how the fact she says during the opening line that she should have stepped in to deal with the Operation Strix. And it was true, but it only would have made sense to put two of the same agents on the same job. But I had the funny feeling that it would have been a bit odd, given the fact of how dispassionate she would have been. And from a certain point of view, I think Loid made a good choice with Yor. As for one, she looks, appearance's sake, she actually does quite a fair bit of the job. And also at the same time, it's far more convincing if, from a spy point of view, if for a fact there's a certain degree of attachment between the two. Given how this is set somewhere sort of in the 1960s, I think, where the setting is, so naturally, of course, it would have made more sense for a stay-at-home mum. Naturally, of course, this was almost the norm back then. But besides the point, also I think there's the fact that because Eden Academy is very conservative in its outlook, so naturally, of course, by having even though a stepmom, of course, the whole mother passing away type spiel probably makes it all the more convincing, and it also marked an impression on at least one of the Eden staff members, namely the guy who keeps saying elegant, and where's the monocle? Because that pretty much convinced him of the fact that while this may be a blended family, Yor definitely meets his definition of a good mother in terms of the fact that she was quick to comfort Anya when she was upset. I think the other thing also would have done that with the fact it would have tried not to have to jump up between wives. But it makes a lot of sense there. But one thing I do like a thing about her character is the fact that, while she is a yardere, I want to think the fact of Yor seems to be comparing herself to Fiona in many ways. It's almost the fact that Loid doesn't know about it because she doesn't necessarily say it. But I think it's also the fact that Loid probably wouldn't necessarily go for her anyway. Because as far as he's concerned, their relationship is strictly professional. And could possibly the fact of, what exactly there's one point in the episode I do like quite a fair bit, which is, what exactly are you doing? You don't seem to be able to do much at all. Such as the fact of how the fact that are you questioning my methods for this assignment? Because of the way the subtext, the way it was all said, because basically they were talking like spy code, which is something that Anya pretty much got quite early on, but Loid also got, but Yor didn't. She thought they were just like comparing things. I mean, they probably might have been work colleagues. I mean, Fiona is a hospital clerk, so they would have interacted. But I think it was the fact the way they spoke in code. Look, you're going, this is my assignment, my mission. I decided the plan, you were involved in other stuff. And besides, I actually kind of like this job, this assignment. And quite possibly, I'm actually enjoying myself a little bit from time to time. I think the other interesting thing about the whole episode, I think it was the second part. This one was shorter than the other two, and take place after the credits, but what made it so good was the fact that it's basically one of those quote-unquote sort of like play on that sort of like that stalking type relationship amongst other things. Basically, Anya watches a cartoon, probably one of Ostania's propaganda cartoons about state service and everything else. And in this cartoon in particular, one of the characters gets killed and dies on the line of duty. And of course, Anya being 6 years old and probably maybe either being a little bit repressed or acting like a 6-year-old, just falls asleep. And instead of sleeping with the usual stuffed animal, she sleeps with a penguin because one of the characters, the penguin, actually gets killed. And of course, this sort of semi-traumatizes Anya. And as a result, and then of course the penguin gets attacked by a... Of course, Bond doesn't like the fact that penguin's in my spot because of the fact that Bond sees himself as Anya's playmate. I mean, that's the whole point when you have a dog. So of course he trashes the penguin in the night. And then what makes it even more funny, I think the fact was Anya goes like, the penguin! But of course, you always just demonstrates the fact that one of her many talents, the fact she's very good with a needle and thread, most likely probably have to mend her brother's clothes. And her own as well. And probably even have to make them. So nicely, of course, she repairs the penguin. And of course, poor old Bond, everyone knows the fact it was Bond. And he goes, I hate you, Bond. But then, of course, as time goes by, Bond and Anya goes like, oh, I've ruined it, haven't I? So he goes phoning around in the cupboard and brings out Anya's favourite snack, which are peanuts. And then, of course, he's like, look, I'm sorry, okay? I thought I was your special friend. I'm a dog. Okay, you were the first person who were kind to me and everything else. And that can create quite a fair bit of confusing things in life. And as a result, I think, or possibly the whole episode, I think it's sort of a parody on the Yardley type trope. And of course, eventually they make peace, and then of course, it's the penguin that Bond does, and he goes like, okay, I'll make peace with the penguin as well. And then of course, Loid watches on, and there's a little bit of pride in himself, going like, oh, if only peace was that simple between East and West. And it probably would be true, I mean, the fact of politics involved, but the fact is the fact that Anya has grown up just that little bit, and she's a little bit older, and she's grown up a little bit. She forgives her dog for, wrecking one of her new favourite toys, and quite possibly she might want to another one anyway, during that time. And let's face it, Bond is far better than a stuffed animal. I mean, you can actually play with him, and he'll listen to you as well. He might just bark, probably go woof, woof, when Anya complains about things. We don't exactly know how old Bond is, so that will be something else. Another thing I also like about the whole thing was just the fact of Loid going, oh, if it was that similar between East and West, because that's the kind of thing he's working for, is peace between East and West, and Westeros spends so much time trying to do that, and meanwhile other factions in Ostania try and ruin it. But I think Ostania is also trying to do that, but the problem is the fact that they do it in a different method. In other words, I think possibly in that world, the last war was so devastating, and given the fact of the way some of the characters act, I get all for a funny feeling that the conflict that happened in the past, Fiona and Loid were traumatized victims of that conflict. Handler, being she's a little bit older, I think probably maybe, I don't know, her lover was a soldier in the conflict who got killed. Or maybe for a fact that she was a victim herself. And as a result, that's both shaped their outlook on life. Handler and Loid devoted themselves to protecting the peace. And Fiona was likely fell into Wise's service, and probably is the way she is, because of the fact of she was an orphan, or maybe she might have been part of an Ostania program. I mean, we don't know how Ostania works for all now. She could have been that country's version of the Hitler Youth. I know that sounds a bit much, but let's face it, given the way of her outlook in life, and how she acts, and how well drilled and disciplined she is, maybe that's just the key. Well, I believe this returns. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheerio!